Washington's running game needs to get off to a hot start against Weber State.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hansen. He's the site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast with zero sugar and a convenient portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. Lars, one thing that we're really looking for, because we got a really fun show coming up, we're really diving into Weber State. It's exciting because it really is football season again. It's great. We love it. So we're going to be looking at Demond Williams, how much we think he's going to play in the opener. We're going to be talking about the cornerback battle because these are things we're watching, but there's nothing that we're looking at more right now than Washington's running game, because Weber State has a really solid, experienced defensive line, and this running game needs to get Jonah Coleman in particular off to a hot start on the ground.
Absolutely. And it starts with the offensive line. And I think the one thing that we saw throughout fall camp was this offensive line will die for Jonah Coleman, and will die for anybody. But really, it seemed like what I said a couple of days ago on the show, like Jonah Coleman is the heartbeat of this team and the heartbeat of the offense. And that's no disrespect to Will Rogers, because, again, you have to have a quarterback in college football. But when you look at what Jonah Coleman kind of brings to the table, just as a personality, as an aura, the way he runs the ball, how fluid he is as a pass catcher, he's a Swiss Army knife, and a guy who kind of runs like he's got some like knives in him, where it's like you either don't want to tackle him, you have a hard time tackling him. And I think that's what makes Jonah so dangerous, because when we talk about what this offense needs to do, the best way to get an offensive line some confidence, let him go forward, run the ball. Just let them lay some guys out, get that confidence up. So when you drop back to pass, you're not actually trying to, put them on their heels a little early. And there's no better running back to do it with than Jonah Coleman, because like we saw at Arizona, 5 yards in a cloud of dust, 6 yards in a cloud of dust. Again, Jonah doesn't have to get 1,000 yards this season. And he's not necessarily, he's a 1,000-yard back, absolutely. But that's not necessarily what makes his game. His game is get me the ball, and I will find a way to the end zone, because I'm a Marshawn Lynch mindset kind of guy with Michael Turner's body. Because, again, he's not as necessarily big as Marshawn, but he's big. So that when you look at everything that Jonah can do, there's no reason. If you're Jed Fish, you should be running the ball 5-6 times on that first drive, jam it down Weber State's throat, get Jonah the confidence, get the offensive line some confidence, and just let it roll, because that's exactly what you brought Jonah in for. Yes, you wanted Noah Fafita. Yes, you wanted McMillan. But Jonah is what you got. And I think it's almost kind of better for what this offense needs. It's just a battering ram back there that can just say, you know what? I'm going to set this tempo. You're not going to take us lightly. We are going to run you. We're going to run over you and smack you in the mouth. That's exactly the kind of person Jonah is, while still being a humble and nice kid. Like, he's a great kid, but he's violent when he's on the field.
That's everything you're looking for, right? Where when I look at Jonah, that's exactly what I expect from him this season. Or the guy who is going to set the tone for this offense, where I feel like at the end of the year, we're going to look back on this offense and say, yeah, we watched Denzel Boston, we watched Jeremiah Hunter, we watched this passing game, be really good, be in rhythm, look really nice on film because of what Jed Fish's scheme is. But Jonah Coleman is going to be the heartbeat of this team, just in terms of what he can establish, especially as a between the tackles runner, where I feel like, when they want to go off tackle, they're going to bring in not necessarily Cameron Davis, or I feel like he's a between the tackles guy, but not necessarily on the level that Jonah is, where they'll bring in an Adam Muhammad or maybe a Jordan Washington or one of these other guys to kind of break off some of those outside runs. But when I watch Jonah, I love the power. I love everything that he can do when he's on the field. And that's exactly what you want to do in your first game, where especially as Washington moves into the Big Ten, there's this heavy emphasis on running the football. There's this heavy emphasis on making sure that you're strong up front, strong in the trenches, all these things. And with Jonah behind them, I feel like this offensive line has an extra kind of boost of confidence when we look at what this first five that's going to roll out there is going to be, where it's a lot of guys who, aren't experience in terms of playing together. This is their first game together. So getting somebody behind them who they know can make a play for them is going to make them want to play harder and is really exciting. But Lars, with some of the other guys in this room too, Cameron Davis and Adam Muhammad specifically, Washington's offense really needs to make sure that all these guys get going. And I feel like they can do a really good job of that, even against an experienced Weber State front.
Exactly. Well, in a way, Cameron Davis and Adam Muhammad do some different things. Even throw Daniel God and Sam Adams in that mix when healthy. Those guys also do different things. And I think that's what makes this offense so dynamic is when we talk about Jonah, he's a pass catcher, runner, and all that. Cam Davis can do similar things. Adam Muhammad showed that he could catch the ball, be sleeky outside the tackles. So when you look at the dynamic of the running back room, I remember asking Will about this after I think it was either the first scrimmage or the second scrimmage, where it's, have you ever had a running back room this eclectic? Eclectic is diverse, for lack of a better term. Where and he didn't answer, but he's like, look, we got some good horses back here, and I think that's what's going to make this offense go. Because, again, we know how good Will is. We know he could be a 3,000, 4,000-yard passer on the right offense. But if Will is just sitting back there, we saw Mississippi State, there's a ceiling with that. And that's not Will's fault. That's the scheme's fault, which is why the running game is so important and why Scotty Graham you can see everything in a way falls through Jonah, but everybody does something just a little different. Like Cameron Davis, this is his running back room, as we said, that Scotty Graham said. So Cam's still going to be able to run between the tackles, as you mentioned, but can be just as serviceable as a pass catcher. And I think it's about managing the volume and getting it. Everything comes down to not total yards, but yards per carry, yards per attempt. You should be, because I know Jonah was in that 6-7 range at Arizona. You'd imagine he'd be somewhere in that ballpark. I would imagine Cam gets somewhere in the realm of 5, and I'd imagine Adam gets somewhere in the realm of 4. That's kind of what the staff needs is whenever we put you in, whether it's 2nd and 8, 2nd and 2, we're looking for 6-7 yards. We're not looking at you to just, okay, let's get this 2 yards, reset the downs, and then we'll throw to Will. No, we're thinking for the entire field here. And I think that's what makes Jedd Fisch's scheme so lethal at the end of the day.
So, Lars, you made a lot of really great points there, but you said one thing that as soon as you said that, my mind started turning. And that's the one thing I'm going to focus on here. You said managing the volume. And that's one thing where, we've talked a lot about the Jonah Coleman, Cameron Davis split, what that all is going to look like. But what about Adam Muhammad? And I don't mean that, in terms of anything you said, but that's one of my biggest questions. And I'm going to talk about that a lot when we get to the Friday show as well and get into our predictions, where that's one thing that I'm really, really looking at is what is the Adam Muhammad role going to look like? Where, you, me, our guy, Christian Capel, Andy Yamashita, everybody who's been out there at practice with us, we have all kind of been in the lockstep when it comes to Adam Muhammad. Whenever we watch that guy, we just say, that dude's going to play. That dude's a stud. Scotty Graham agrees. Jedd Fisch seems to agree. Where everybody seems to agree that he's going to play. The question is how much. Is he going to be, a 5-carry guy a game? I don't think that's necessarily worth burning a red shirt if it is. 6, 7, is he going to get, 10 to 12 snaps? What is that going to look like? And that's a question that I have where I don't know if necessarily Weber State is going to be the best judge of that in terms of, FCS team. If they get up big early, he's probably going to play a lot more in the second half. But I want to watch, especially in that first half, depending on the flow of the game and how it all goes, what Adam Muhammad's role is going to look like in this offense, because the more he plays early on in the game, I feel like it's just more of a sign for what this running back room is going to look like as we get into the latter half of the schedule, because this is a guy who I really feel like can be a true game changer whenever he's out there. And Lars, speaking of game changers, this cornerback room is a really exciting group, and this competition between them is going to be really fun to watch on Saturday, which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Are you tired after lunch? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch, and a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. Try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You choose the flavors and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. You can use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. We talked a lot about the cornerback battle on our depth chart show the other day, and as the everydayers know, it's a very interesting battle. And when Jedd Fisch spoke on Monday, he seemed to talk about it as if there's still a top three and then a little bit of a gap between where whoever you might consider three, whether it's Elijah Jackson or Thaddeus Dixon, and where Darren Barkins is. But Darren is still listed as a co-starter. And I'm really intrigued as to what that's going to look like on Saturday, what kind of snap count he's going to get, and just in terms of, I'm not even just him, with all four of these guys, are we going to see, what you and I both expected and predicted, that Ephesians Prysock is going to get, the lion's share of the snaps at one position, and then Thad and Elijah rotate on the other side? Or is it going to be a true split between, the way it's listed on the depth chart, and that's Ephesians and Elijah, and then Thad and Darren Barkins?
Yeah, not to be narcissistic, but I think we're right on this one, because, and that's no side to Darren Barkins. I just think with the way exactly, I'm glad you mentioned it, that Jed broke it down, where it's, look, it's Ephesians, it's Thad and Elijah. Those are the kind of the first group, and in order here. And then, Darren's kind of, because Darren's been rising, and I think that's why his or ended up being, and then again, you combine it with some of the other injuries at the position. Caleb Presley, again, was coming along in that similar realm. But similar to what we saw throughout part of the depth chart, where Jacob Lane is in, Jaden Wayne is not listed. They're both going to play. But you're giving that nod to the guy who's been there, Darren Barkins, again, for everything he did last season. Again, was hurt, so we didn't get to see much of him. But if you're playing good and you're available, you're not a good coach if you don't throw that guy in there on some level. And so I think what I'll be curious is when do we see Darren Barkins? Because that, to me, it's whatever the splits are, it's going to be what the splits are. Especially at cornerback, you're probably going to also get Caleb Presley in there, depending on, all of this is depending on how the score is. If this is, 21-17, 21-10 going into the third or fourth quarter, I think that reduces the amount of rotation we see, where if it's, 45-10, probably going to see a lot more of the freshmen or redshirt freshmen, which is exactly what you want to see if you're a coach.
Yes.
But in that respect, if Darren's coming in let's say the first or second quarter, tagging almost what they did with Jabbar last season, where Jabbar would come out and it's like, why are we taking Jabbar out? It's like, well, we're kind of testing the guys behind it. That's kind of the conclusion you and I came to, because there was no obvious injury. There was no reason to take Jabbar out. It was more or less, okay, you know what? This is their ones. We got a 14-point lead. Let's see what happens. Whereas you're not doing that if it's a 10-point, 7-point, 3-point lead. So there's going to be certain times in which these rotations come into play. And then also, we've seen 3 safeties, 3 cornerbacks. So how do you end up mixing it up is also going to be the key. But it's more or less for me when, not how much.
So I'm glad you mentioned that last part there, where it's when and how much with some of these guys. And the 3 safeties thing is one thing I want to focus on from that, because one thing that you got me thinking about there is if they are up big at some point. One person who we saw play a lot with the second team at cornerback, even though he's listed on the safety as a safety on the depth chart and on the roster, is Rashawn Clark, the 4-star from Garfield High School, where that's a guy who, when I watched him at corner, I was really impressed. He was really fluid. He was a nice mover. And it's one of those things where if they are a big, why not try him out over there and just see what he looks like on the back end with Caleb Presley, with Dyson McCutcheon in there, with some of these other guys. And I'm just really curious how that's going to look, because I think that Darren, with the way he might be used, is a little bit situational, because we know his best attribute by far is his speed. He's really fast. He's got really nice long speed, and somebody who, if you want to put him out there against one of those deep threats, for anybody who's been playing as much college football 25 as I have, where it's one of those things where if Jedd Fisch wants to change his little matchup thing to buy speed, you put Darren Barkins on their fastest corner, or on their fastest receiver. I feel like that's a really good idea. That's something that wasn't necessarily used in previous years, where like I think about that USC game last year, and I know Darren was dealing with some injuries throughout the season, but like, if you need somebody who's going to go chase around Zachariah Branch, might as well be that guy, right? Where you like a dude with good technique, but if somebody can really run with him, that's also a fantastic idea. So I feel like we might see some different sort of situational matchups like that. And that's one thing I really love about what this coaching staff wants to do. It starts with Steve Belichick, who's always had the coach speak of the scheme is going to fit the players, but that's the definition of the scheme fitting the players. It's saying, all right, yeah, we want to make sure we can cover this guy who we think has really great speed on the offense. So we're going to put Darren Barkins out there to do that. Or we think this guy can out physical us, so we need to make sure that Ephesians Prysock is on that guy. Where those are the little things that this coaching staff is willing to do and willing to substitute and willing to use the resources that it has to make sure that it's always at an advantage, which is something that I'm really excited to watch. And at cornerback specifically, it's going to be really intriguing, not just against Weber State, but throughout the season for me.
Exactly. And I think this is why it's the first litmus test. What does Darren and some of these guys do? And then that's it's almost like how high school or college used to be broken up, where you have a kind of early semester exam, a midterm exam, and then a final exam. And then you kind of put all three together and you get your grade. We're not just going to solely grade it off of this one, but we haven't truly seen it yet. And in Darren's case, we haven't really seen it at all, because we only got to see him in that one practice that he picked off Damon. When Jed said he had a force fumble, another one, and something else, another practice. It was like, okay, well, we didn't see those practices, so we'll take your word for it. But with that being said, it's what does it look like on game day? Because in the same sense, Thaddeus has played. Elijah is certainly the Sugar Bowl tape etched in everybody's history forever. All that is, everybody's played. Darren's been the one guy who truly has not played legitimate college football. And that's no slight to Darren, because when he was at Oregon, redshirt freshman, getting some special teams reps. And Oregon, he was pretty far down on their depth chart, and then comes to Washington, plays first 3 games, gets hurt. So he just hasn't had the opportunity. So how much run does he get? And then how much does that maintain when some of these guys like Leroy Bryant come back and start to push him in practice? If Curly Reed's able to push him, Caleb or Sean Clark. It's a good position to be in, because you're still solid with 3 corners. If you have 3, you at least have 2, your main 2 start, because we're not even talking about Jordan Shaw. Like that's the nickel corner. That's a separate position here. We're just talking about 3 boundary corners. And in that respect, it's a good problem to have, because let's say Elijah struggles or Thaddeus struggles, you just put one or the other in, and you still have Darren if you need a guy to cover as a 4th guy on speed or whatever you want to do. And I think that's why, again, Steve Belichick clearly will never say this, but he knows that his scheme is perfectly tailor-made for what the roster has, in the sense that when we talk about the 3 safeties, or we talk about the nickel and Justin Harrington coming down and somebody else dropping back, Elijah, we saw a little bit of that 3rd safety spot. There's so many guys that can do a number of things. There's no reason to hamstring it. It's just, hey, whichever one of you guys can get the stop on 3rd down, figure it out. We'll put you in there. To us, it doesn't matter whoever gets the stop. We just want the stop. And I'm not saying for us. I'm talking as the coaching staff here. The coaches just don't. There's no agenda to say, hey, look, we want that out there because Roman Alar said he's going to have 2 picks today on Locked On. So we need to.
That'd be great, Steve. We know you're listening.
we need to make sure that bet hits. No, but it's serious, because it's like you're not going to put a guy, and I think that's why they put Darren in the depth chart. It's round this kind of whole thing out. Is they believe in him because they've seen it over the past week and a half of practice. But practice and games are much different. If Darren can prove it in a game, if I put the over-under for Darren at like 2.5 PBUs in the first 3 games, just a fair kind of low bar and a teaser for what we'll do on Friday, but just something to say, look, make a play, make an impact. You showed you can do it in practice. If you can do any little bit in the game, you're going to get more reps. And I think, again, if Darren happens to, grow into being a significant contributor on the team, it's a good problem to have. That means you have 4 solid quarterbacks. Right. That's a good problem to have.
Exactly. And that's what you're looking for. And, I want to kind of harp on not necessarily what the battle would be in the second half per se, but what some of those backups might look like. And one guy that I'm really curious about is Curly Reed, where, we know last season he was recovering from an injury, still somewhat recovering from an injury he suffered in high school. And he took the year to redshirt, and the coaching staff didn't necessarily give him all the attention that he might have needed in terms of development. And I feel that this year might not necessarily, because I know a lot of fans have asked me about Carly Reed. Lars, I'm sure they have with you as well, where he's a guy that I'm really excited about in the long term. And I really want to see what John Riches can do with him, where I think that this is going to be kind of utilized as a year where, all right, it's not necessarily a prove it year for you, where it's going to be a lot of teaching. And then we want to see what you really are going to be able to do in 2025. And I feel like we might get some little snippets of that early on in the season, where when I watch Curly, I just see worlds of potential. And I'd be really excited if, I got to see him trot out there in the third, fourth quarter, line up at outside corner for 10, 15, 20 snaps, call it. And that's one of the things that I'm just curious about in terms of the secondary in general, where we talked about, the starters. We talked about the starters all offseason long. But when I look at what the cornerbacks are going to be, these top three guys, they all have the option to leave after this season if they want to. I know Thad's out of eligibility. The other two guys are able to come back if they want to. We'll see how things end up. But when I look at this, I just see, okay, we're not only hopefully in these first couple of non-conference games, not only going to get to look at the present state of Washington football at the position, but we might get a glimpse into the future, which is something that I'm sure everyone would appreciate. And Lars, speaking of glimpses into the future, we need to talk about Damon Williams. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot because it is America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. And, just a heads up for the everydayers out there, Lars and I were going back and forth in the pre-show about who the official Locked On team of 2024 is going to be. We haven't made a decision yet, but one team that we're really looking heavily into is the Tampa Bay Washington Huskies. I mean Buccaneers, because they've got 6 guys on the 53-man roster, and we think they have a really nice opportunity to win the NFC South this season, where that roster is loaded, that defense is loaded. We'd love to see guys like Jalen McMillan, Joe Tryon, Vita Vea make a big impact in that. And you should go check out their odds at winning the NFC South over on FanDuel. And we've also got a message from our good friends over at Factor, because you can fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals with 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. You can make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. You can stay fueled with easy, nutritious options, and you can treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. You can head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Lars, the Damon Williams experience, which is really the only way to put it here, is about to begin. As we've said on the show multiple times already this week, many members of the media have asked, hey, are we going to see Damon in certain packages? What's that going to look like? Jed has given us the best answer possible. It's why am I going to tell you that? You got to wait and see. And we feel that, if this game goes the way that it should with a Big Ten school against an FCS team, that Damon should play a decent amount. But the question is, and I know you've been the leader of this agenda, is how much?
So I'll just tell you this. Week 1, you're not going to see the packages that we're talking about for Damon that gets him to 6, 7, and 8. You're going to see if Damon can play a college football game. That's what you're going to see. Because as long as Washington, barring the 2021 season, is going to have Damon come in. Damon's the second quarterback on the roster over Shaker Kendall, so he's clearly going to get the second reps, and that's what we saw throughout fall camp. My thing is probably going to be if he comes in the third quarter, Jed's going to want to make sure he knows how to execute the offense, which means you're probably going to see a decent amount of runs. And if Washington is up big, you're going to want to just bleed that clock out in the fourth quarter. I wouldn't expect him. I would be very surprised if Jed pulls the starters before the third quarter, no matter, barring the score being like, 65-0 at the, midway through the third quarter, which I don't think is going to happen. Just realistically, let's be honest here.
Sure.
So I think, the starters get 3 quarters and then the backups get the fourth quarter. And how many of the backups end up getting in, so be it. But I think Damon, he'll get some decent reps. I'd probably say 5'7", 5 to 7. No disrespect, that wasn't a shot at his height because I'm short as well. But just a few passes, but more or less prove that you can handle the lights. Because I think we both know he can. The lights aren't going to be too big for him. That's not the issue. But just the coaches haven't seen it. And what we did see from the first scrimmage and the mock game. And the mock game was better, but it wasn't transcendental or anything that should vault him ahead of Will. And obviously he never did. But there's a way in which Damon can grow every single time he's on the field. Will, Damon showed he could play. The question is, was it ever going to be better than Will? I don't think so. But even Will acknowledged at his press conference, Damon's going to be great in the future. But to answer the question of how much will Damon play on Saturday, again, I don't see him getting in before the fourth quarter. He'll probably get 5, 6, 7 pass attempts. They're going to want to run the ball, which again, Adam Muhammad. Can you execute the offense, which you're going to be doing next year? Run the ball with Adam Muhammad. Take snaps from Landon Hatchett. Direct the offense. Throw to Keith Reynolds. Throw to Audric Harris. See if you can get some chemistry with some of these guys against a lesser opponent. And if you can do that, we'll see what happens against Eastern Michigan. We'll see what happens against Washington State. Washington State, for me, is a true litmus test for Damon, because it's going to be your best opponents that you're going to face, and we'll see how much game time he gets in that respect. So if he doesn't get in against Washington State, that's kind of indicative of where things are at overall, not just for Damon.
So I certainly hear what you're saying there. I disagree a little bit, because I think that it's one of those things where, there's the gamesmanship aspect of, if you are up big against an FCS school, but I kind of looked at this a little bit differently, where when I look at Damon, whenever he does get in, whether it be the fourth quarter, I think it might be a little bit earlier, just again, depending on the situation. But when I look at that, what I see is Jed is going to want to really test Damon, where that's the whole point of, bringing in Will is obviously to have him for this season. But the whole point of having Damon and propping him up, getting him in here for spring ball, doing all those things was to push him as much as he possibly can. And I think that the offense is going to be really opened up, where Jed's going to say, we want to see you throw it more than 5 to 7 times. Where, again, there is, like I said, the gamesmanship aspect of just the score and whatever's going on, but you want to make sure that your future is intact, that you know what you have. And you and I have seen what Damon can do in a practice setting, in some of these scrimmage game settings, but it's just totally different in your first live game action. So my question is, why limit it? There are certain things, obviously, where, I don't think they're called design runs for him. They're not going to try to get him hurt or anything like that. But I think that they just want to make sure that you can really see what he's going to be able to do in those very first reps inside Husky Stadium.
You're right, and but I'm glad you mentioned not the design runs, but the running element. Did Damon ever have more than, let's just say, 6 completions in a drive? I think he might have had once in fall camp. But my point in that was we saw Damon run a lot, and I think that's why the attempts won't be as high, because he'll take some of those that would be attempts and start to run and get some extra and show his dynamic ability, show why we want to have you on the field, because Will Rogers can't do that. And that's no slight to Will.
Right.
Michael Penix said
he just doesn't move like
he
Mon
also
does.
Can lace. Exactly. And so it's not that it's not that he runs like Peyton. It's not that Will runs like Peyton Manning, where it looks like, it's kind of painful to watch sometimes. But he knows how to run. But that's why when we're talking about some of these special packages, or could you line up Adam Muhammad and Damon Williams next to Will Rogers in the backfield at the same time to see what will happen, maybe a double pass. Probably not going to see that against Weber State, but you'll probably see that at some point in the first 3 games of non-conference. But the reason why is you get the ball on a guy who's super dynamic and just let him figure it out. That's why, I don't, and also the other side of why I said 5 to 7 passes, Damon could still throw for 120 and 5 passes. We
That's
saw
fair.
that in fall camp. Like, so that a lot of me is thinking, hey, can you take a deep shot to Audric Harris against, zone coverage or whatever? Can you make those plays? And again, when you think about it, whether it's the third or fourth quarter, well, Weber State's probably still going to get some possessions and you're still running the ball, so you're bleeding the clock out. That limits the amount of possessions that you're going to be able to have. And that's DeMond's not going to get back there and go, 15 passes in the fourth quarter. Like, I just don't see Jed as that kind of guy. And so for me, that's why I'd kind of put it at 7, maybe 10, but
right.
that'd be
But
kind
see,
of hard.
but that's where we differ, though, is I think he might get in a little bit earlier than that, where it's going to give him a little bit more of an opportunity, where once you get to past that, let's call it 8-minute mark in the fourth quarter. Again, this is assuming the game goes the way we think it will, is why are you going to push him at that point? But before then, that's why I think he might get in a little bit sooner than that. And we might see him where, let's say it's a 3 possession game at a certain point, where if he gets a drive in around then, I'm not going to be overly surprised. Would it be a little soon? Maybe. But I wouldn't be overly surprised if that happens, because this is Jed's philosophy. Jed's philosophy is playing these guys. There are a bunch of freshmen in the 2 deeps, including DeMond, where that's the whole point. That's what he wants to see, is he wants to make sure that these guys are ready, whether he needs them this year or not. He wants to see what he has in them. And so what better opportunity to do that than in this sort of setting? And I think that's kind of one of the exciting, many, many, many exciting things about what Saturday's game is. But looking at DeMond and looking at what kind of role he can play in his very first game is something that I'm going to be watching very, very closely. And Lars, with that being said, thank you as always for being here. And thank you all that every day was tuning in. Thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On College Football podcast, from NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors. Our guy, Spencer McLaughlin, gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And just a reminder to also go check out the Locked On Huskies Insider Program. You can find the link to that down in the description below. You get a free 2-week trial. After that, it's $4.99 a month. We got so many fun things that we've got going on over there, like a Google Drive where we give you access to all the interviews we've done throughout spring and fall. We do exclusive Q&As that you can only find if you're a Locked On Huskies Insider member. That's the only way you get the link. You can chat with us one-on-one directly to your inbox. This is all texting. It just goes straight to your phone. It's super easy. It's super quick. There's so many fun features. We want to make sure it's very, very well worth it, so you should definitely go check that out. We would really, really appreciate that. And since the season is back in full swing, you need to make sure you subscribe to Locked On Huskies wherever you get your podcasts. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please make sure that you click that 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.